I walked into that gathering telling myself it would be a light evening, the kind where conversations flow easily, and no one says anything sharp enough to bruise. I held Daniel's hand, hoping it would steady me, but his fingers felt distracted, almost absent. The room carried that familiar mix of appetizers, perfume, and people who all seemed to know each other better than I knew myself. I tried to shake off the discomfort, chalking it up to nerves. I've spent years swallowing insecurities like medicine, pretending they made me stronger. But the moment Melissa stepped through the door, the air shifted as if someone had dimmed the lights inside my chest. She walked toward me with the confidence of someone who still believed she owned every space she entered. Her smile was sweet, but her eyes cut like cold glass. I straightened my posture, reminding myself I had every right to be there beside my husband. Still, my stomach tightened as she drew closer, her heels tapping the floor like a countdown. People subtly turned, sensing the tension before a single word was spoken. When she stopped right in front of me, the energy around us went still. Then she said it, soft, polished, poisonous. "Oh, look. Daniel brought his charity project." Heat crawled up my neck so fast it made me dizzy. For a split second, I wondered if I had misheard her, if she had really said something that cruel so casually. But the look on her face told me she wanted every syllable to land. I opened my mouth to respond, but my voice tripped over disbelief. The room felt smaller, tighter, like the walls had shifted closer, and before I could even grasp the moment, everything inside me started unraveling in directions I wasn't prepared for. I managed to whisper, "Excuse me?" But my voice sounded thin, almost foreign, like it didn't belong to the woman standing there. Melissa tilted her head, savoring the moment the way someone savors a victory they didn't earn. "Sweetheart," she added, dripping mock sympathy, "he only dated you to make me jealous. Everyone knows." Her words didn't just hit me, they wrapped around me, squeezing every ounce of dignity from my lungs. I searched Daniel's face, desperate for him to say something, anything. Instead, he stared at the floor, as if defending me was too heavy a lift. When he finally muttered, "Melissa, stop." His voice was barely audible, more embarrassed than protective. And she laughed, loud enough for the entire room to hear, sharp enough to slice whatever was left of my pride. "What?" she said, looking around with theatrical innocence. "Didn't he tell you how desperate he was back then? Poor girl, thinking he actually loved you." Each word landed like a stone in my chest, dragging me deeper into a humiliation I never saw coming. People pretended not to stare, but their silence was louder than the music, and Daniel still didn't step forward, didn't defend me, didn't choose me. That was the moment something inside me cracked, not loudly, but quietly, the way a thin line appears on fragile glass before it fully shatters. My face burned, my vision blurred, and I felt every pair of eyes pressing against my back like a weight I couldn't lift. I didn't wait for the scene to end, or for Daniel to find his courage. My body moved on instinct, turning away as if survival depended on it. I walked out, hearing Daniel call my name behind me, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. The night air hit me like a slap, cold and honest, and all I could think was, if he won't fight for me here, he never fought for me at all. Walking to my car felt like wading through thick water, every step heavy with shock and disbelief. I could still hear the muffled sounds of the gathering behind me, laughter, glasses clinking, music pretending nothing had happened. My hands trembled as I fumbled for my keys, the cool metal slipping against my fingers. I wasn't just embarrassed. I felt stripped open, exposed in a way that left my chest aching. I kept replaying Daniel's silence, wondering how a single moment could confirm every quiet fear I'd ever had. It was as if Melissa had spoken aloud a truth my heart already suspected. The streetlights blurred as I got into the car, the brightness turning into streaks through the tears I hadn't even realized were falling. I rested my forehead on the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing, but the words "charity project" echoed louder than my heartbeat. How many people believed that? How many of them looked at me with pity, thinking I didn't belong beside him? A painful mix of anger and humiliation surged through me, twisting into something sharp. I wasn't sure which hurt more, Melissa's cruelty or Daniel's silence. Maybe they stung for different reasons, but together they made me feel small. When I finally lifted my head, I felt a shift, subtle but real, like the first crack of dawn. I wasn't sure what it meant yet, only that something inside me refused to stay frozen in that moment. I turned on the engine, letting the hum ground me, letting the darkness outside feel like a place to hide and breathe. As I pulled away from the curb, I knew one thing with aching clarity. Tonight had opened a door I couldn't close, and whatever waited on the other side was already pulling me toward it. I drove without really seeing the road, my mind spinning in tight, painful circles. By the time I pulled up at Jenna's apartment, my body felt hollow, like I'd left pieces of myself back at that gathering. The moment she opened the door, the warmth of her home hit me. The soft lights, the faint smell of vanilla candles, the comfort I didn't know I was craving. And just like that, the tears I'd been holding back tore their way out. I collapsed into her arms, my breath shaking, my voice barely forming the words I needed to say. Melissa said he dated me just to get back at her, and he didn't deny it. Jenna guided me to the couch with that gentle firmness only a best friend knows how to use. Her eyes kept scanning my face, as if she was bracing for the weight of my next words. When she finally said, "Vic, you need to sit down," something cold slid down my spine. I wiped my face with trembling hands, trying to prepare myself, even though I had no idea what was coming. "What? Tell me," I begged, already fearing she would confirm the one truth I wasn't ready to face. Jenna hesitated, really hesitated, and in that hesitation, my heart started to break even before she spoke. "When you two started dating," she said slowly, carefully, "Daniel did tell people he was finally going to show Melissa what she lost. I didn't want to tell you because you were happy." Her voice cracked near the end, like she hated being the one to hurt me, even if the pain wasn't hers to give. The room seemed to tilt, the air thinning as my mind tried to hold on to something solid, but everything felt slippery, unstable, like the floor beneath me had quietly given way. "So he never really wanted me," I whispered, the words tasting raw and unfamiliar, as if they belonged to someone else's heartbreak. Jenna's face softened with a mix of guilt and sympathy, the kind that tells you someone has been carrying a secret they never wanted to hold. "I think he grew to care," she said gently. "But yes, in the beginning, it was spite." Hearing that word, spite, hit me like a second betrayal layered on top of the first. I felt my breath catch, like my lungs didn't know whether to inhale or collapse. My hands shook as I pressed them against my knees, trying to anchor myself to something real. But nothing felt real. Not my marriage, not my memories, not the man I thought I knew. I stared at the floor because looking at Jenna meant facing the truth reflected in her eyes, and in that silence, pieces of my past with Daniel rearranged themselves in painful clarity. The insecurity I never admitted out loud suddenly made sense. The emotional distance I had blamed on stress now looked like something far deeper. The way he always mentioned his past, casually at times, wistfully at others, felt like a warning I had never recognized. I remembered how he said I made him feel chosen, but now it seemed more like I had been convenient. A placeholder. A message he wanted someone else to read. My chest tightened, the kind of ache that feels like it might split you open from the inside. "Everything makes sense now," I whispered, not sure if I was talking to Jenna or to the version of myself who still wanted to believe Daniel chose me honestly. My mind replayed every moment I'd felt like second place, every time I'd wondered if he was fully present, fully mine. It all flooded in at once, raw and heavy, like a storm that had been building for years. And in that moment I realized something painful. Sometimes the truth doesn't just crack you open, it rewrites everything you thought you were living. I lifted my hands to my face, feeling the warmth of my tears as they slipped down, each one carrying years of questions I had never dared to voice. Jenna sat quietly beside me, giving me space to fall apart without trying to stitch me back together too soon. The room felt smaller, almost suffocating, as if my body was trying to contain an entire earthquake. My heart thudded hard, not from anger but from the painful clarity of finally seeing what had been in front of me all along. "Was I really that blind?" I whispered, voice cracking. And God, it hurt to even ask that. Jenna reached out, placing her hand gently over mine, a small gesture, but one that steadied me more than she knew. "You weren't blind," she said softly. "You were in love. And love makes us hopeful, not foolish." Her words settled over me like a warm blanket and a sharp blade all at once. Part of me wanted to believe her, to forgive myself for not noticing the signs. but another part felt betrayed by my own heart, wondering why it had worked so hard to protect a lie. I leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling, trying to slow the swirl of thoughts threatening to drown me. As the quiet stretched between us, something inside me shifted. Subtle, almost imperceptible, but powerful enough to change the air around me. It wasn't acceptance, not yet, and definitely not peace. It was the awareness that a truth like this doesn't simply hurt. It transforms you. It forces you to see yourself differently, to confront the parts of your life built on sand instead of stone. And as I wiped the last tear from my cheek, a new question formed in my chest, pulsing with equal parts fear and determination. What am I supposed to do with a truth that changes everything? Driving home that night felt like heading straight into a storm I wasn't ready to weather. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached, as if holding on harder could somehow keep me from falling apart. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the house looked unfamiliar, like a place that held someone else's life. I sat there for a moment, breathing in the quiet, feeling the weight of everything Jenna had told me settle into my bones, and then I saw him through the window, pacing the living room like a man afraid of his own shadow. My heart hammered, not from love, but from the need for answers. The moment I stepped inside, Daniel rushed toward me, his voice shaky with relief. "Vic, thank God. Listen, I'm sorry about Melissa. She's impossible sometimes." He spoke quickly, like an apology could erase the humiliation, the truth, the years of wounds I hadn't realized were bleeding. His face carried worry, regret, maybe even fear, but none of it mattered if it didn't come with honesty. I stood there, my body still, my heart trembling, and I realized he had no idea what I knew. He thought tonight was about Melissa's cruelty. He didn't understand that she had only ripped open a door he built, so I cut through his rambling with a single question, one that held every fracture inside me. "Do you love me?" The words came out softer than I expected, almost fragile, as if they were afraid of the answer, too. Daniel blinked, startled, then rushed to say, "Of course I love you." But something about the way he said it felt rehearsed, too quick, too easy. Like a phrase he'd repeated so often it lost meaning. I could feel my pulse in my throat, a painful reminder that love shouldn't have to be interrogated to sound real. I held his gaze, refusing to let him slip past the question buried beneath my words. "Did you date me to get revenge on her?" The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was loud, crushing, filled with every truth he didn't want to say. Daniel's face tightened, his jaw shifting as he searched for an answer that wouldn't expose him. But the hesitation was its own confession. "That was years ago," he finally muttered, eyes darting away. It didn't matter. Hearing those words felt like someone pressing a thumb into a bruise. He wasn't denying it. He was minimizing it. "So it's true." My voice didn't rise. It didn't break. It just settled. Heavy, tired, like my heart had finally reached the limit of what it could tolerate. Daniel stepped closer, panic flickering in his eyes. "Vic, come on. I love you now." But now felt like a bandage slapped over a wound that had been ignored for far too long. I felt myself recoil, not physically, but emotionally, pulling back from the version of him I had built in my mind. "But you never chose me," I whispered. "Not really." And the moment the words left my mouth, I watched them hit him harder than I expected. "That's not fair," he tried to say, but I shook my head, stopping him. "I don't trust you, and I don't believe you." The softness in my voice surprised even me. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't angry. I was done. Daniel reached out, trying to pull me into a hug, but I stepped back, and the look on his face cracked something inside me. Maybe it was pity. Maybe it was the last thread of hope snapping between us. All I knew was that my heart wasn't breaking anymore. It was waking up. I turned away from him and walked toward the bedroom, every step feeling strangely steady, as if my body finally understood what my heart had been avoiding. I pulled out a suitcase and set it on the bed, the sound of the zipper cutting through the tense silence like a final verdict. Daniel stood in the doorway, frozen, watching me fold clothes with a calm that terrified him. His voice cracked as he said my name, but I didn't look up. I couldn't. If I saw his face, I might hesitate. And I'd spent too many years hesitating already. "Vic, don't go. I'll cut all ties with Melissa. I swear. His voice shook with desperation, the kind that comes only when someone realizes the ground beneath them is disappearing. But his plea didn't touch me the way it once would have. It felt too reactive, too late, like he was trying to save the idea of us rather than the truth of who we were. I closed the suitcase slowly, letting the soft click of the latch punctuate the space between us. "It's not about her," I said, finally meeting his eyes. "It's about me." And for the first time, I meant it in a way that felt life-altering. When I walked past him toward the front door, he reached out instinctively, as if grabbing my arm could rewrite the past. But he didn't touch me. His hand hovered in the air, trembling, then fell back to his side. I stepped outside into the cool night, the air brushing against my skin like a reminder that I still had a life to claim. Behind me, I could hear his breathing break, the sound of a man losing something he thought would never leave. I didn't turn around. I just kept walking, feeling a quiet certainty rise inside me. Something had ended, yes, but something else had just begun. Leaving Daniel's house that night felt like stepping out of a life I no longer recognized, and into a version of myself I wasn't sure existed yet. For days, I moved through the world in silence, letting the shock settle, letting the truth find its place inside me. People think anger is loud, explosive, but mine wasn't. It was quiet, almost surgical, carving away everything that no longer deserved space in my life. And once the numbness faded, a strange clarity rose up, steady and sharp. I didn't want to scream. I didn't want to expose him. I didn't want revenge the way movies portray it. I wanted something far more haunting. One morning, as sunlight filled my new apartment, I realized the most powerful revenge wasn't destruction, it was evolution. Becoming someone he would never have again, someone he would regret losing every time he closed his eyes. So I made a promise to myself. I would build a life so full, so radiant, so deeply mine that it would echo in his mind like a ghost he could never exorcise. Not out of spite, not out of hate, but because I deserved to feel whole again. And if that wholeness kept him awake at night, questioning everything he threw away, well, that was just a consequence he earned. So I started small. I signed up for a fitness program, the kind I'd always wanted to try but never made time for. I bought new running shoes, laced them with a sense of purpose, and felt the ground beneath me shift as I took my first real step forward. Each workout became a reclamation, each drop of sweat a quiet declaration that I was rebuilding from the inside out. And the more I showed up for myself, the clearer it became. Healing wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. And the woman I was becoming? She was nothing like the version he thought he could break. Soon, the changes became bigger, bolder, almost addictive in the best way. I signed up for salsa classes, something I'd secretly dreamed of for years, but always convinced myself I didn't have time for. The studio smelled of citrus cleaner and warm wooden floors, and the music vibrated through my chest like a heartbeat I had forgotten was mine. At first, I moved awkwardly, self-conscious, unsure. But then something clicked. My hips loosened, my smile returned, and for the first time in a long time, I felt alive instead of merely functioning. Every spin, every step whispered the same truth. I was coming back to myself. I changed my hair next, not dramatically, but intentionally. A fresh cut, lighter layers, a softness around my face that made me feel like I was shedding an old skin. People noticed. They complimented. They asked what had changed, and I would smile, offering answers like, "Just needed a refresh." But beneath those simple words was a deeper shift, one that no one could see unless they looked closely. I was no longer shrinking myself to fit into someone else's story. I was writing my own. And each time I caught my reflection, I saw a woman who wasn't surviving heartbreak. She was transforming because of it. Then I started volunteering. Saturdays at the community center, afternoons helping organize donations, moments filled with laughter and gratitude instead of tension and waiting. It grounded me. It reminded me that life could be generous, that people could be kind, that my heart still had the capacity to give without expecting anything in return. And somehow, while I wasn't paying attention, joy began slipping back into my life in small, consistent doses. The kind that didn't feel forced or performative. The kind that felt like truth. Before long, I found myself posting little glimpses of my new life. Nothing dramatic, nothing pointed. Just quiet, honest snapshots. Me laughing with new friends. me leaving a dance class glowing with sweat, me sitting in a cafe with sunlight warming my shoulders. And every caption carried a soft truth, the kind that speaks louder than shouting ever could. Sometimes losing something is the universe protecting you. Grateful for the lessons that pushed me into becoming this version of myself. They weren't about him directly, but they didn't need to be. Anyone who knew. And that was the beauty of it. I wasn't dragging him publicly. I wasn't telling my side of the story. I wasn't painting him as the villain. I didn't have to. People drew their own conclusions from what they saw and what they didn't. The messages started trickling in. You look so happy. Something about you is different. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. And deep inside, I felt that warm spark. Validation, yes, but also liberation. My happiness was mine again. My life was mine again. And every joyful moment I shared was a reminder, to him, and maybe even to me, that I had risen from something meant to break me. Daniel saw every post. I knew he did. His text started out cautious, then confused, then desperate. Why do you look happier without me? Were you pretending when you loved me? Did I ever matter? And finally, the one message that told me everything I needed to know. I can't stop thinking about you. I replied only once, choosing my words like someone placing the final piece of a puzzle. You taught me exactly who I should never settle for. And after sending it, I felt a quiet satisfaction settle over me. The kind that wasn't cruel, just honest. The kind of truth that lingers. Months slipped by, and with each passing week, I felt myself settling deeper into the life I had built. Steady, peaceful, beautifully mine. So when Daniel reached out begging to meet, I felt nothing sharp. No anger, no longing, just a calm curiosity, like revisiting an old book you've already finished. We met at a small cafe, the kind with warm lighting and the faint smell of cinnamon drifting through the air. I arrived early, not out of eagerness, but out of habit. My new life had made me punctual in ways the old me never was. When he walked in, his shoulders slumped, eyes tired, I realized how much he had aged in the absence of my presence. He sat across from me, his breath shaky, his hands fidgety, like he was trying to keep himself from falling apart in public. "Vic, please," he whispered, his voice cracking at the edges. "Give me another chance." Hearing those words didn't sting the way they once would have. They landed softly, like raindrops on a window I no longer planned to open. I watched him, really watched him, and saw a man haunted, not by what I'd done, but by what he'd lost. And for the first time, I felt the full weight of my revenge taking shape not as punishment, but as clarity. "You loved the idea of me," I told him, my tone even, almost gentle. "You never loved me." His eyes blinked rapidly, panic flickering across his face like a dying flame. "I do now," he insisted. "I swear." But the urgency in his voice didn't move me. It sounded like a man clinging to a memory rather than a future. Sitting there, I realized something powerful. He wasn't asking for me. He was asking for the version of himself he lost when I walked away. And that version no longer existed. I leaned back in my chair, letting his desperation settle between us like a heavy fog. There was a time when seeing Daniel like this would have shattered me, would have sent me spiraling into guilt or second-guessing. But now it felt like watching the ending of a story I had already healed from. "You only want me because I don't want you," I said softly, not to hurt him, but because it was the truth sitting plainly in front of us. His breath hitched, as if my words had found the last intact part of his pride. And for a moment, he looked at me like he was seeing me clearly for the first time. "I'll do anything," he whispered, his voice trembling, raw, broken. "Please, Vic." But I could see it now. He wasn't promising change. He was begging for relief from the regret eating him alive. I let a small, tender smile touch my lips, not mocking, not triumphant, just honest. "You already did," I told him. "You pushed me into the best era of my life." His face crumpled, confusion and pain twisting together, because he realized my healing wasn't a reaction. It was a transformation he had unintentionally fueled, and that was a truth he didn't know how to hold. I stood slowly, feeling the strength in my spine, the grounded confidence in my chest. "Thank you," I said, my voice soft but unwavering, "for motivating me to become someone you'll never have again." His shoulders collapsed, his hands falling uselessly into his lap, as if the weight of my words stole whatever was holding him upright. For a heartbeat, I watched him. The man who once made me feel small, now shrinking inside his own regret. Then I turned and walked away, leaving him in the quiet corner of that cafe, alone with the ghost of everything he'd taken for granted. As I stepped out of the cafe, the cool air wrapped around me like a quiet affirmation that I had finally crossed a line I was never meant to return to. Behind me, I could almost feel Daniel sinking into that chair, realizing the conversation wasn't a pause in our story, it was the final page. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The heaviness that once lived in my chest was gone, replaced by a calm so steady it felt like freedom. I walked down the street with the slow confidence of someone who had reclaimed every piece of herself. And for the first time in years, my heart felt entirely mine. Over the next weeks, I heard from mutual acquaintances that Daniel wasn't doing well. They said he looked drained, unfocused, lost. The kind of loss that makes a person wander through their own life like a stranger. I didn't celebrate it, but I didn't mourn it either. Actions have echoes, and his had finally returned to him. Sometimes I'd picture him sitting alone at home, scrolling through old photos, replaying moments he once dismissed. That was the real consequence, not my happiness, but his awareness of the role he played in losing it. Regret is a long sentence, and he was only at the beginning. And while he unraveled, I kept rising. My routines, my friendships, my laughter, everything felt brighter, clearer, no longer tangled in the question of whether I was enough for him. I knew now that I had always been enough, more than enough. He just never saw it. Walking through the world with that truth felt like stepping into sunlight after years of shade. And deep in my chest, a quiet certainty settled. My revenge was never about destroying him. It was about becoming unforgettable, to the man who only realized my worth when I finally walked away.